Welcome to the Daughter Podcast, where dads come to talk, grow, and thrive. I'm your host, Oscar, and this is a space for men who are committed to becoming stronger, more mindful, and more present, especially in the lives of their daughters. Fatherhood is a journey of growth. Each conversation on this podcast is a chance to learn, reflect, and level up as a dad and as a man. Whether you're a brand new father or deep into the teenage years, we're here to support each other through every stage. Being daughter means embracing the lessons our daughters are continuously teaching us and using them to become better. We challenge current misconceptions of masculinity and instead lead with strength, compassion, and intention, building stronger relationships and lasting memories along the way. This show is for everybody who's ready to show up, not as a perfect parent, but as a growing one.
Yeah, good, Oscar. Thanks for having me on. It's great to talk with you. Oh boy, yeah. Well, our kids. So, like you mentioned, Oscar, I have three girls: Sienna, who's 7, Isla, who's 4, and then Laura, who's 2. And our days are starting a little bit later than they used to, especially thanks to our 2-year-old starting to get into somewhat of a groove. So woke up at maybe 6:45 ish, and kind of jump in our bed. Our oldest one comes in our bed. Our little one can wake up. She has a little light that comes on in her room that lets her know that she can come out of her room. So yeah, so it starts off pretty quiet, but then it gets crazy pretty quickly. So yeah, after we get them breakfast, they're running around the house. I'm chasing them. This morning I was doing Daddy Shark and try to attack them and capture them all morning. And I had to preserve my voice for you, Oscar. I was like, I got to take a break here, but yeah. So it's just a lot of fun running around, and of course the unpredictable meltdowns. So it's a part of our daily life. Yeah, so I come from a family of 3 boys. I'm the youngest, and my wife comes from a family of 4, and she's the only girl, and she's the youngest. So, and we both of us knew that we always wanted kids, and that was kind of our hope and dream one day. But we didn't think about. Yeah, I never genuinely thought about genders. I never thought about, oh, I want to have a boy to have one like me. Maybe we can work out together. We could do this one day. So we never really had that in mind, but it definitely was a surprise when we ended up having one girl, absolutely, and then 2 girls and then 3 girls. So it was definitely a surprise to us and everybody, just statistically and just given our backgrounds here. And both of, especially my mom, who didn't have girls growing up, was like, oh, wow, look at this. Now I get all my girls I can have. Um, so it's a different side of motherhood and grandmotherhood that she can have now too. So it was definitely a surprise, but it's nothing that we ever thought about. Of we're just happy to have our girls, our kids. One thing that we always did hope for, who knew if it was going to materialize, was to have 3 kids. That was kind of our life dream. to reach that, and we're very fortunate and lucky that we did. And I get asked now about, are we going to try for a boy? Or and I don't. I know people are well-meaning when they ask that, but I don't like it when they do. It's just infers that my kids, as they are, aren't good enough, or that I have some agenda in procreating or raising, welcoming kids into the world. I'm just happy to have kids, and we were hoping to have 3 kids, and that's all that really matters to us. No, not at all. Oh, sure. Especially if you're with all 3 of them alone, you know? Yeah. Yeah, I just reply with, some level of grace and just leave it at, we're happy with our three kids, and that's love them to death. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so our first pregnancy was, my wife has very fortunately never had trouble getting pregnant. It's obviously a concern and challenge for a lot of people out there. Uh, but our first was, we were spoiled by our first textbook pregnancy, easy. I mean, morning sickness and all those symptoms, but generally no complications. And got pregnant quickly, had her quickly without incident or anything. And then after her, we were working towards number 2, and we ended up having a miscarriage, which, of course, a lot of moms and dads, men, women, whether you're a dad or not, or mom or not, experience. About 25% have a miscarriage, right, at some point. And then we had a second miscarriage as well. So that was really hard, going from is what can happen, what can be considered, quote, normal, going down, but it goes down from 25% to having a miscarriage to being part of the 1% who have 2 miscarriages in a row. And that's a harder club to be a part of. And that second miscarriage also happened during the first month of COVID lockdowns. So we were isolating, we just started potty training our 2.5-year-old, almost 2.5-year-old, that weekend of lockdowns, and then trying to keep our jobs, trying to keep our sanity, and then losing a child in the first trimester. And then we got pregnant really quickly after that, just without trying to or anything like that. That's just how it worked out for us. But that was certainly a difficult time to go through COVID and lockdowns, the worst of it, the very initial weeks, and to feel lonely already, and then to feel even lonelier after that in our journey. Um, so luckily, we were blessed early in COVID again to get pregnant, um, very very quickly, and then yeah, had our third too. And those weren't without complications either. We had complications with both of them, in terms of my wife having to ease off of exercise, and some kind of things about where the orientation of the fetus and stuff like that, that we had to be aware of, and the doctor was tracking with us the whole time. So that was turned out lucky for that. Well, also one thing I didn't mention is that we were selling our house at the time during COVID lockdowns at the time that we lost this child, and buying a house and moving across the country. So I didn't even mention all of that in play too. And I think it was just out of pure survival. It was, those were, even looking back, and my dad said to me at the time, this is probably going to be the hardest phase and months of your entire life when you look back at this one day. And we're only a few years, we're only 5 years out of that, but it's true so far. So, and I think we just had to, we knew it wasn't each other's fault. Nobody did anything wrong. And we recognized that there wasn't a problem, and we had to accept that there wasn't a problem with anybody here. It just happened the way it happened. And the doctor didn't have an explanation. Um, so it was just pure happenstance. And we knew all we had were each other at the end of the day. We were going to start a new life in a new town across the country very soon after that, and we just had to look out for each other as best we could. So yeah, I think it was just, we knew we were in it together, and out of necessity we were present for each other. We wanted to be, but also just because of the circumstances, we had no other choice but to become closer through that. And yeah, it takes two. Yeah, yeah. New York City. Yeah. I was working at a big PR firms up there. Sure. Yeah. I mean, in terms of having a girl in the first place, I was excited. And if it were a boy, I would feel the same way. I would tell you the same thing, Oscar. So I really don't see any difference in my excitement for bringing a child in the world. And like I mentioned, my wife got pregnant pretty quickly and easily. So we were planning for it, we were working for it. And so it wasn't a surprise by any means. And it was just a pleasant surprise in that sense when it happened, when it did. In terms of my career, we were living in New Jersey at the time. We used to live in Manhattan prior to then, and we moved out to the burbs, bought a house, that whole thing, to kind of raise a family. We didn't want to have a child in the city itself, and our plan was to commute and we did that for a few years before COVID hit, and so that was our plan, was to stay in the New York City area and raise a child and make it work. And one thing I saw when working and having a kid was just looking around my group of maybe 30 people in my specific practice, let's call it. And I looked around and thought about how many parents there were. There were very few. I went to a male superior, and I asked him, I said, "Oh, we're having our first kid. You had your first kid recently. How did that go with your work-life balance? How did you make it all happen?" And just looking for some advice here on how to navigate this. And he said, "Oh, we chose for my wife to stop working and stay home." Cool. Awesome. That wasn't in the cards for us. We were both working at the time. My wife was planning to maintain her career. And that individual's response to bringing a kid into the world was, my wife will just stop working. And that is the true luxury of all luxuries. Absolutely. But it's hard to see in my group of at least a few dozen people for that to be what I heard. And I said, okay, I was, it was hard to hear that, noting that that was a very drastic way to navigate it. And I thought about the other people who had a kid, and they had one kid. Nothing wrong with that at all, but just the fact that they weren't having a number of kids. They had a kid in their 30s or something like that, and they didn't work in the New York office full time. So then I said, okay, I look around myself. I look around my cubicles, and I said, okay, so I'm like the only one who's planning to work 5 times a week, come in the office 5 times a week, raise a kid, and live the career life. I realized like maybe there's a reason why I'm the only one in this boat. Maybe there's a reason why this doesn't really lend itself to raising a kid. And at that time, I was dropping my kid off at daycare at 7. They opened at 7. I was there within minutes of them opening every morning, got on the bus, had an hour, 15-minute commute into the city on a bus on an express route. I had a great commute, very easy, stress free. And that's what it took. And then it was an hour on the way back. But I was basically gone from 7 to 7 every day. And that was, I barely saw my kid during the week. I had a conversation about how I was going to help with pickup after work and stuff, and I had a conversation with my boss's boss about it. And I was hoping for an opportunity to come to some balance so I can support my wife and her career and balance things out between the two of us. And in speaking to him, there was no conversation. It was, you can go home once a week and cut out a little bit early. And there was no, does your wife work? What does your wife do? Where does she work? What's her schedule? There was absolutely zero questions about it. It was, this is what I will allow, and you will comply. And so I was allowed to cut out of work one day a week. It was Thursday was my day. And cutting out early, Oscar, was 4:30 in the afternoon rather than leaving at 5:45. It was already like an hour. And so I had to tell my wife, she had to tell her bosses that she wasn't really giving them an option. This is really how it played out for me. And this was what was expected of me. And in turn, the domino effect of how it affected her and how her bosses and her management. And so they just had to accept it for being what it was. But it was hard to realize, knowing that I was a present father at the time and I was knew I always wanted to be and always would be. It was hard to hear that I didn't have a choice in the matter. It was just expected that the mother would take the brunt of the child rearing and taking off work and the sacrifices. And that just didn't sit with me well. And I didn't have an option. But I also came from a company where we didn't get any paternity leave. I had all 3 of my kids with this company, and I didn't have any paternity leave for the first 2, 0. So I worked it out with my boss and was able to get little time that I could just under the table to make it work. But that was a big sign as well that I took to heart and saying, is this really what I want? Yeah. It was when we had our first, and about a year into her being born, my mother-in-law passed away. So we lost her pretty rapidly from pancreatic cancer over a period of very few months. And that was shortly after our first child turned 1. So that, of course, turned our life upside down, especially my wife's life upside down, her family's life upside down. And so she ended up deciding after that, using her mother's passing as an opportunity to become closer with her own family. So she ended up leaving her corporate career and working with her dad and one of her brothers, one of her 3 brothers, as part of their family business. They're entrepreneurs, and so she basically used it as an opportunity to bring herself closer to her family, and something that her father always wanted to do and invited her to do, but she was never ready until that point. So there ended up being one of us commuting, and she worked from home. And so we're living in North Jersey, where everyone's life is a commuter life, and so she was working from home full time. I was going to the office, and then you just talked about all the things that kind of built up from what I just mentioned in terms of I said, okay, this is fine when our child is young and a baby, but what happens when she has activities? What happens when we have more kids that we were hoping to have, right? And so it just kind of put our life into perspective. And I even got on a bus one day, and you see the regulars on the bus, everyone's going into the city together. And there's this guy who I just recognized time and time again. He's in a suit in his 50s. And I said, is that what I want for myself when I'm at 7:15 in the morning in my 50s, to be in a suit and tie and going into the city? And so it just kind of weighed on me over time. And before COVID, we were looking to move out of the area, the New York City area, and move to Dallas, where my wife is from, and where all of her family never left. And her brothers and all of their children, so all of our children's cousins and whatnot. And so we were deciding to make a move and looking to buy a house before COVID. And it just so happened we found the house during COVID, and we said, this is our shot, let's take it. But we were really looking for a work-life balance and an opportunity to raise a family in the way that we wanted to raise a family. And we realized it wasn't possible in the way we wished it would be possible, while still being present, living in the rat race of New York City living. So, I was commuting 2.5 hours a day. And like I said, barely seeing my child during the week outside of Thursdays. And, I would see my daughter for maybe a half hour a week outside of, Monday through Wednesday and Friday. And it was like, what am I doing here? So that was, so really having a kid and the passing of my mother-in-law were definitely the two big implications for moving away. And like I told you, Oscar, we were never planning to move away. We didn't see this in our life plans. And when we were dating, I said, oh, I'm not, if we're going to stay together, we're going to agree that you're not requiring me to move back to Dallas. And that was part of our plan, or informal prenup, if you will. So everyone started laughing when we said we're moving to Dallas, and everyone was all surprised, and our families and extended families were surprised and everything, because they knew that was the last thing on my mind. But it made sense. And of course, your mind changes, your life changes, everything changes when you welcome a kid into the world. And especially in an environment like that, in a corporate environment like that, where I knew it wasn't sustainable. Absolutely. Absolutely. And against our choice and against my choice. I wanted to pick up my kid from daycare more often. I wasn't given the latitude and opportunity to do that. It was out of my hands. It was decided for me. And one thing, Oscar, that's interesting is that, of course, when my mother in law was sick with a really terrible prognosis, I ended up, my life before that was working my day job and then going right to the gym right before catching the bus home. I would go to the gym every single day or almost every day. And that was my routine. It was the easy life. It was awesome. It was trouble free. And of course, when my mother in law got sick, I needed to be there for my wife more, and didn't want to be leaving at 7 in the morning and coming back at 8:30 at night. So I would come home more often and skip the gym and be there for her, and be there so she wasn't a young and new mom who was navigating losing her own mom all by herself. And what happened, of course, unfortunately, we ended up losing my mother-in-law. But after that, I said to myself, okay, do I want to go to the gym or see my daughter? Those are the only two choices I had. And I chose, and I brought my bag and my clothes to work, and I asked myself that, and every single day it turned into, I want to go home and see my daughter. And so I just stopped going to the gym. And And I had such limited face time with my child. I chose her every time, and I took that as a sign saying, okay, I just put the gym on hold for now, and I just need to be there for my wife and my child. And so that's what I ended up doing. So to your point, I had to make that decision, that I wanted to make the decision to be there, and I chose her every single time. There's no competition ever, no debate. Yeah. Yeah, I would have felt guilty knowing I had such limited time with my daughter, and I barely saw her in the morning, unless if she woke up at on time. I barely saw her, if at all. And I would feel guilty if I chose myself. My physical health is important, absolutely. Mental health is absolutely paramount. But if I chose myself every single day over my child, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that's not good. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And especially when you're given either or, and now you have the luxury to do both. But when there's no room for any of that, no latitude for that, when I'm commuting 2.5 hours round trip every day, I just don't have enough time at that point to function beyond beyond the basics. Yeah, I mean, especially with work from home and everything like that, it definitely changes your approach and understanding, and different approaches from companies that they have on how you can actually, you don't have to be present in the office to be BB-sat. You can actually get your work done as an adult. Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. If they can hold themselves accountable. Of herself. Yeah. Yeah, day to day. Yeah. Well, we just had parent teacher conference this week for our preschoolers, our 4 and 2-year-old. And what they do is they show you their pictures from the first day, for the first month of school, and a picture of what they look like now. And it's just like, oh my gosh, a whole school year, almost a whole school year. And it's just half a year. And it's just crazy. It Yeah, and one thought I had, I've never been in photography ever, and like the typical camp experience as a kid, there was probably a dark room if you're old enough like us, and you got to see how that all worked. And I saw that, and I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. And there's these chemicals in the pan, and you get to make a picture. Okay, cool. And I retained that, but it never evolved into anything of interest. And so when we welcomed our first daughter, I knew I would always be a present dad. And I always wanted to be there for them and myself. And I said, I'm already spending all this time raising this child. Why not capture it? Why not document it? And so I picked up did a little bit of research, and when my wife was pregnant, bought a camera, and I said, okay, I want to at least, I never picked up a camera before, really. And I wanted to figure out how to use it before we had the kid, because of course, all hell would break loose at that point, right? So I figured I got it when my wife was 6 months pregnant. I said, okay, I have a trimester left to learn how to turn this thing on and learn how to take a picture. And I said, you know what? Let's see if I like it or not. And if I don't like it, I don't have to do it. It's just an opportunity to see if it's something for me. But I knew I was going to be with this kid all the time. So why not document it if it was something? So I wanted to explore that side of me and the side of parenthood. So that's what I did. So I spent a few months just understanding, watching YouTube videos was how I learned how to do the settings and how to all those basic things of just picking up a camera for the first time, so that when my daughter came, hopefully maybe I could take some pictures. So that's what I did, and it was fun. And I'm the kind of guy where if I'm into something, I get really deep into it. And so that's what ended up happening with photography, where I went from I remember when we had a newborn, or she was just born, and during nap times, my wife would go to sleep, because when baby sleeps, you sleep. That was the only way mommy was going to sleep, especially during breastfeeding. And so I didn't sleep at all during those nap times. I had the camera. I circled the room with our newborn on the boppy or whatever it was, and I took pictures. And the baby wasn't moving. It was like the perfect way to just like see how the settings worked and how to click the shutter and how to set the aperture and how to like do all these different things with it, just on like a static object, your baby. So I was literally like an hour and a half, 2 hour nap time. I was just circling that kid like a hawk, just taking pictures from all angles and just absorbing what it meant to me to take pictures. And those pictures I still have, but I would not like really particularly look back at them. There was really just a way of me learning how to take a picture and learning what I liked about taking a picture. And so then I got down the rabbit hole of documentary photography. And there's a whole genre out there, Oscar. If you look it up, family documentary photography. And it's uh, people, parents, adults, whether you have a kid or not, adults with a camera taking real life moments and capturing real life moments of their kids. And I grew up with my mom saying, for better or worse, saying, okay, say cheese, or she had a countdown, say, or for three, and then I take the picture. And if you weren't ready when she counted to three, she would pause and wait for you to compose yourself and smile and look at the camera and then count to three again. So I grew up with the whole 1, 2, 3 mentality, very uh, posed and all of that, and not authentic at all, and just kind of smiling at the camera. And so I knew when our first child was born that what interested me in photography was capturing the real life moments, not smiling, look at me, everybody looks perfect, everybody looks happy, but just reality. And so that's what it refers to in when you refer to it as documentary photography, it's capturing life as it is, the 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 good, the bad, the ugly, the messy, the crying, the tears, the stress, everything. And also it refers to the mundane of capturing just the everyday moments. It could be brushing your teeth, whatever it is, trying to get dressed in the morning. And that's what I wanted to capture, and what evolved over time into my photographic voice of wanted to capture their childhood through the way that I wanted to see it and present it one day. And that ended up me maybe a couple years in, um, going into black and white exclusively and stuff like that. So it's kind of a whole evolution where I am today, but it's never left me. And I still remember when during the delivery of my firstborn, I had the camera ready, Oscar. I got it ready because we were, she was in labor and for a number of hours and just sitting there and just waiting and whatever it was. And and so I had the camera already, and the nurse knew I had it already. And the baby came out, and so I was like trying to be there for my wife and helping her and everything. And then the nurse looked at me and just did this, just did, like reminding me to get the camera and take it out. So, oh yeah, oh good point. I still remember that. It was just so beautifully compassionate of her. And so I said, oh yeah, I got to get my camera. So I picked up my camera and started taking pictures. But like I didn't even think of, I was so immersed in just helping my daughter. I didn't want to appear selfish by holding a camera when my wife was pushing out our firstborn. But it was funny when the nurse had to remind me, be like, oh yeah, this is something you should capture. I'm like, oh yeah, good point. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you gut instinct. Yeah, your Neanderthal mind when lights went off, right? And said, "Oh, this is mine." Yeah, I bet. Different. Yeah, and there's a whole discussion to be had there on whether you capture the moment or be present for it. And so I've learned over time, there's some moments I just want to be present for. There's some moments that, I hate to say it, don't inspire me photographically, but I've learned over the years that there is a way to capture the moment and still be present for it. It's just not, and it's about not letting the camera be in between you and your child, or be in between you and your moment. You could even have the picture, not have it be stuck to your eye the whole time, where it looks like you're using your child as a prop for whatever you want to create. And it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be either or, but yeah, I mean, it's totally appropriate to want to get lost in the moment. And when you say getting lost in the moment, it sounds negative because you're using the word lost and whatever. It's not like you're losing something. You're just committing yourself to the moment and treasuring that memory that you're making. So all stills. We take videos on our iPhones, so that's what we use. So yeah, I just do black and white still photography for what I want to capture, in that medium. But we capture tons of photos on our phones and all those kinds of snapshots that we take every day. So there's like unlimited volume of that, right? Thousands of pictures that you'll never really go through again at some point. There's just too many, you know. Mhm. Yeah, and I mean it's a personal preference. There's tons of beautiful color photography out there. It's just that on an individual basis, black and white ended up speaking most to me. And I think it's because it strips away any distractions, especially kids' clothes, kids' toys, kids' environments are all so colorful and vibrant. And I don't want to lose out on that when I'm experiencing it firsthand. But do I need to be reminded that that tent is pink or that toy is blue and her shirt is green? I want to be reminded about the emotion of the moment and felt what it felt like in that moment and kind of remove the color as a component that could be distracting so I can just focus on the feeling of that moment. Yeah, well, great question, Oscar. I think one thing that we knew was going to happen when we moved to Dallas, my wife's hometown, was that we were going to be able to work from home. And even if ultimately I got a job in the future that would involve some sort of travel or whatever it was, but generally we would be working from home, and we both currently do. And I think the biggest part is that we are both there to send them to school, drop them off at school, and to receive them at the end of each day. So being there when they leave the home and being there when they come back is beautiful and not to be taken for granted. I know it's not possible for a lot of people. It really it allows me to just even mentally know that, and mentally for me and mentally for them, that I am there or my dad is there before I go, to drop me off and see me off to school and be there when I come back. So that's one thing that's really just been fulfilling on a personal level as I navigate. Work is currently working for myself and doing PR for different clients, and also I think just compartmentalizing it and making sure that I'm able to shut off my brain and give time to my kids and be present for them when they come home from school. Okay, it's time for dinner and let's get stuff together. And I am there. And then if I need to work again, I'll work again after putting them to sleep, which I often do now. And that's fine. That's a sacrifice that I'll make. But at least, especially on the weekends, being there and just compartmentalizing and separating the lines from there's a work life and there's a personal life, and making sure that I give my wife, my daughters, my family, myself the time that everybody is deserving of my personal attention. So the move has been great in that perspective, to have that autonomy and balance. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I I think, I don't know if it's surprising or not, but I think I'm being more sensitive. My wife and I are more sensitive to having girls. That's all we have and whatnot. Even though we would teach the same things to boys, in terms of the ability and the strength of the word no, and saying no, or having autonomy of your own body. We currently don't, because our kids are climbing all over us, right? But teaching our 7-year old that, and now our 4-year old, that if someone is touching you, you can say no and say, I don't want to be touched that way. And all these things that we would teach boys just the same. But knowing the implications of that as a girl dad, where you need both parents, or one parent, whoever's present, to make sure that your daughters have a voice that they can use. And like I said, Oscar, we would teach boys that just the same, but I think it definitely carries a different weight for girls, and as they turn into women, for them to know that they were empowered from a young age, that my voice matters. I can say no if I'm uncomfortable with something. I can speak up for myself. And typically, past and present, male dominated society. And so I think even just having ownership of your own body, that certainly my wife hopes to return to one day, but that our kids can grow up with that mentality that they have full right over their own body and nobody else does. And right now, that's an important lesson from playtime and whatnot, but certainly as they grow into teens and go into college years, of having those, I guess that's a surprising thing, Oscar, is being more sensitive to things that I didn't think about growing up. My wife did, but she grew up with 3 boys, and it just was a different environment she grew up in. So I think instilling those values, knowing that they would need them one day, and almost unfortunate feeling and circumstance, knowing that it's going to be it's going to be a thing one day that they're going to have to face, and helping support them turn into those individuals as they become adults and enter adulthood. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We can't change the whole world, but we can change how we interact with the world. And so our whole thing is not influencing what's going to happen to them. We'll never be able to influence that, but at least helping them be their own best advocates. Yeah, I would say think about what's important. And if you have a partner, talk to your partner about it and make it a reality. I know that's easier said than done. And if you're doing shift work, and you're trying to just cover the bills every day, it's hard to just say, I want complete freedom and live life my way, right? But what are even small ways? If you can't make drastic changes like I did, moving across the country and working from home, what can you do in a small way to be there for your family, but also for yourself, for your family? And if you're not taking care of your own, if part of your desire is being available to others, then what are just some practical little ways you can do that on a regular basis? Because that'll preserve your mental health, emotional wellness, and make sure that it's sustainable. Because if you try to slog in, check in and out of work and just kind of run through the paces of life without really being mentally present, you're not doing yourself or those around you any favors. So it really comes down to finding what is fulfilling to you and making it happen in the space that you are allotted, whether it's a lot of time or very little time, but at least being intentional and making some step to fighting for yourself and what you want out of your life. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Oscar. I mean, being dad is the biggest pleasure in my life. I'm sure same for you, and it's a gift to be able to share my experience, talk about it, and hopefully help other dads out there. But thanks, Oscar, for the conversation. I really enjoyed talking with you. Yeah, no, it's all the same thing. My website, my Instagram is all photojourno guy. And that's because it's inspired by photojournalism, my documentary photography approach. Or also find me on LinkedIn for my business profile. I'm pretty active there and posting as well. So you can either find me on my personal page and photojournal guy or look up my name on LinkedIn.
Hey, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want more of the Daughter Podcast, please go to www.daughterpodcast.com. There, you will be able to find the podcast in all the platforms. You'll also be able to chat with us, send us your thoughts, and shout out a dad that is killing it and someone we can learn from, share their story and why they deserve recognition. And I would love to shout them out during the show in one of our episodes as the season goes on. Additionally, you will be able to find all of our social media information from our Instagram, Facebook, and also our YouTube and any other news on this site. You could also find the daddy-daughter date night guide that we have created, and hopefully that'll help you to create those lasting memories with your daughters. Thank you all for your constant support and for listening and watching the Daughter Podcast.